For the third session of the June 2024 Widening Virtual Training, we'll hear from a woman who I think could lead a masterclass on the art of the pivot. Marian Chia-Ming Liu, professional title, is Projects Editor of Strategic Initiatives at the Washington Post. But when you read her full bio, you understand why her career journey has actually prepared her for this moment in time. Before the Post, Marian was a writer, music critic, and editor at CNN in Hong Kong, and several outlets, including the Seattle Times, the San Jose Mercury News, and Source magazine. She also launched a hyperlocal entertainment site and app for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Uh, those accomplishments and many others, you can go to our website at nationalpress.org and learn more about Marian's impressive career background. But Marian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a complete honor.
So I wanted to revisit something from our first conversation that was so insightful and impactful, and I think the journalists will agree as well. You talked about an interview you had with an editor where he said something that really just triggered a very deep awakening or awareness in you. Can you restate that for us?
He asked, and this was a high-ranking editor, he asked, white man, who asked, why has your career been so random? Except I forgot what word he used. He used some, highfalutin SAT word instead of random. And my first instinct, which I did not say, was like, I did not have, the fortune of being born into a privileged family that had connections. It has never been easy. I'm a child of immigrants. English, it was my second language. Everything I had to figure out, I had to figure out my own. Did not have, parents that could guide me or drop me in a job. And I think that journalism is such a hard industry that I've had to evolve to stay afloat. And so that's kind of what I said. I've had to evolve. I've done what it takes. I've learned different skills on the job, off the job, freelance, contracted, did whatever I could to make sure I stayed relevant and, knew the newest skills. And so that's why, I took what I can and stayed in order to stay and do what I love.
Give us some baseline background on you and your career journey, how you got into journalism, et cetera.
So I guess we'll start with, I was a journalism nerd, did high school journalism, newspapers, did college newspapers, grew up in the Bay Area, went to Cal, did the Daily Cal, was a writer there. And then in school had done, the college internships every single summer, but also was a double major, mass communications and biology, also worked in the lab during the year, so was pretty conflicted about what I wanted to do. Was following, I guess, the path, kind of following the path my parents want. I think as immigrants, they want something safe, so they always think doctor, lawyer, engineer. And so was kind of following that path to become a doctor, especially looking into being a cancer doctor, and because I have cancer in my family. So kind of conflicted about that, because I really loved journalism. And I think that early on, being like the little translator for my parents was always a bridge between different cultures. And that's what I loved about journalism, that you can help people understand where you're coming from, whether that is a new rock star, rapper, whatever, to kind of trend that is coming in, to helping somebody, understand from a different culture, your own community, to helping a mom understand why their child likes the newest kind of music, is how I always saw it. And then two things really pushed me into wanting to become a journalist. In high school, I was involved in this inner city paper in San Francisco, where they figured out the month's topic by, like, they had one topic and then everybody would discuss it, and your discussion became the next issue. And that discussion that time was on assimilation. and I was the only Asian staffer. And so they all turned to me and they're like, "So, Marian, why do Asians assimilate?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot speak for the billions number of Asians there. I cannot even speak for all the Chinese. This is not fair to be put in that position." And also on top of that, Asians culturally, we do not speak out. And that's why, during all the anti-Asian hate during COVID, it was such a hard issue because we wouldn't even report it when it happened to ourselves. And it was very frustrating. And how it was important to talk about when things were bad, but also good. I mean, I think that for so many of our communities, you rarely see the joy that, in stories, and that's also important as well as the news. So it's just not one-sided. So that was one thing. The other thing was when I was graduating school and I was interning at the LA Times, two of my friends, and I didn't tell you this story, Rachel, but this is why I'm a journalist. So two of my friends that year passed from cancer. One, it started out as a headache and it became leukemia. One that started out as a stomach ache and it became ovarian cancer. Both of them were not hereditary. It was totally freak cases, did not know where they came from. And both of these women didn't even experience like real love yet. They didn't have like an actual serious boyfriend yet. Like their lives didn't start yet. And it was so heartbreaking. One of them I knew since freshman year, we dormed together, and she just loved life and was even into the dorm food, which was disgusting. And then another one, I've known her since junior high, and we picked our class rings together, and she was buried with hers, and I still wear mine. And I had wanted her to be a bridesmaid someday, and I never had the chance to ask her. And I had to go to work after one of their funerals, so I was at work as an intern and wearing all black and miserable. And I was talking to one of the writers about what just happened. And he was like, "Why don't you write about it?" I was like, "This has nothing to do with anything. I'm covering fashion." And he was like, "No, just write about it. Even treat it like therapy, write it as like a letter to their parents." And so then, and you can Google it, I think it's still online. I wrote about what these two girls meant to me. And then emailed it, the whole thing, to my boss without much introduction. I was just like, "I wrote this. Tell me what you think." And didn't expect it to go anywhere. And immediately she was like, "Do you have pictures? I want to print this." And it made me realize that as, my goal as a person is I want to help people. But as a doctor, it's often one-to-one. You are giving them the fish. But as a journalist, you're touching a lot of people at once and you're almost like teaching them how to fish. So the amount of impact you can make is amazing. And the letters I received, like people who've been through it, people whose friends and family have been through it and lost loved ones, even a month later, this guy told me he was lining his bird cage with the newspaper and saw my story and it made him cry. And I realized that journalism is my calling.
I'm out of curiosity, what did your parents think about you making that?
It's been an ongoing journey with them. I think even like 5 years ago, my dad's like, "So you're still gonna think about being a doctor?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me." And even like I have my MBA, and my parents are so excited that I got that, thinking that I'll finally get out of journalism. And I was like, "No, this is to do more journalism." So we can like, I can actually hone in on our business model and help them on that side too. And they're like, "Oh my gosh." Um, Early on, when I was a music critic, I would actually take my parents separately to events, so they'll see kind of my process and what I do. And when I can, I'll bring them to stuff. But yeah, it's funny. I was project manager, project editor of the uh, the post January 6th project, which was part of our Pulitzer win. And I invited my mom to our internal kind of ceremony about it. And there were 75 journalists that I managed on that project. The project went into like the red flags that went into the insurrection, what went down that day, and the repercussions. and 75 journalists, even more, all kinds of departments. And this was during the pandemic, we had a Zoom that I shared with my mom. And they named 5 people that contributed, and I was one of the 5. And I called my mom so excited about that it happened. And just like an Asian mom, she was like, she should have talked more about you. And I'm like, what? You're talking about the Post newsroom, and I was one of 5. But yeah, that's Asian parents for you.
You know, we have several of our fellows who are interested, I believe, in international reporting abroad. So tell us about how you wound up at CNN in Hong Kong.
I think I'm one of those people. I think when you're in an interview or you're figuring out life, and they're always asked like, where do you project yourself in 5 years? I don't think I'm ever that kind of person. I think I'm very open to happenstance and maybe planting seeds along the way, but it's not like, oh, I intended to be a music critic. Oh, I intended to work in Asia. But I think given that, like I'm first generation born here, can speak Mandarin, that was something I've always wanted to do, like somehow have some like travel and cover things in Asia. And even when I was a music critic, I wrote about a lot of artists who are coming from Asia to the US for the first time on their very first US tour, to the point where there was one guy, his name is Ubai. So he's considered like China's, or I should say Taiwan's Bon Jovi. He's like at that kind of level and that kind of sound. And Chinese people are really into or homonyms, so words that sound like words. So that's why, like the Olympics was on 888, because 8 sounds like the word for fortune. So that's super fortune. And so during New Year's, what we usually do is we put the word fortune upside down, because the word upside down sounds like the word for coming. So when I interviewed this guy, his photo in the Chinese newspaper, he held actually my story upside down, meaning that, saying that he has arrived to the US. So it was really beautiful and symbolic. So I wrote about a lot of the, Chinese pop, Japanese pop, Korean pop, K-pop before it even came, and interviewed a lot of like the people, I guess godfathers, people before like BTS. And so as BTS was making its reign over, before it even got huge in the US, I interviewed them when I was in Asia. So in CNN, did a lot of the like Asian art and K-pop. But the way to back up, in college, Berkeley doesn't have an undergrad journalism degree. So I actually asked them to take classes in the grad school. And 2 of the classes I took was foreign reporting and international reporting in China. So kind of had the grounding there, and they were taught by foreign correspondents from the LA Times. And what was cool about those programs is you actually get to write and, produce in their paper. And so when the opportunity, and this also says like, you never know who you might run into. So like, even for this talk, Rachel saw a post of mine on LinkedIn. To get that CNN job was a friend of mine who worked at CNN. And I've been talking with CNN for a bit, and that she knew I was interested, but not necessarily just CNN in general, not necessarily like Hong Kong. And she was going to start up a new department. So I was like chatting with her kind of offhand about what I would want to do. And she wanted to have a representative each of the different bureaus. So you have Atlanta, London, New York, et cetera. So CNN can run 24-hour. And she gave me the strangest call one day. She was like, Marian, hi, can you speak Chinese? And I was like, what? She didn't even ask like what dialect or what. I'm like, yeah, I can. And I'm like, what do you need this for? And then she's like, oh, I need to translate something. And I was like, okay. But then she didn't tell me what she needed to translate. And then she was like, okay, bye. And then that was the call. And then I was like, that was really strange. I don't know what just happened. And then the week later, she's like, oh, I have a job for you in mind. It's open. Other people can apply, but I want you to do it. Please apply. And but that was because I knew her from AJA, and it shows the power of networking and knowing people. You just never know where people might land too. And I've known her for a very long time.
Had you lived abroad at that point, or was that your
I
first?
have never lived abroad. I've gone to Hong Kong a few times. I have family in Taiwan, and I've gone to Taiwan probably even more, and then have gone to China. So I've been there, and I've been there for like, I guess the longest time I was in Taiwan was like a month. So it was familiar-ish. And my husband is from Hong Kong. Um, yeah, and so familiar-ish.
So one of the things that intrigues me the most about your story as you related to me is that as these opportunities presented themselves to you, you were in a position of why not? I mean, tell us the story about how you got into music writing, I think.
Yeah, that was also, I was never like, oh, I need to be a music critic. I think a lot of music critics, um, funnily enough, are like maybe folks that want to get into the music industry and this is their way of getting in. So they're not necessarily even like Marilyn Manson actually was a critic before he became an artist. And so this is kind of their foray to get into that world. Um, but the way I got into it is I grew up in the Bay and had always read the San Jose Mercury News. So when I started off there as an intern, and then so my goal was to work there and try to win their cars, right? That was like where I projected and got to know the staff and became an intern when I could and was interning when I graduated. So it was my turf. Like I knew the area, I knew what people listened to, I knew the community because it's my community, it's my home, it's my home paper. And when I, as a reader, when they covered music and entertainment, I always noticed that they would get it wrong or they wouldn't even cover it at all. It was incredibly frustrating. And so I found out who that department head was and then just started pitching to her like mad, like, what about this and this and this? You missed this. And how about this and this and this? And I think she finally got tired of me, bugging her. But, um, she was, instead of just getting like frustrated at me, she was like, well, why don't we test you on a story then? So then she asked me to write a profile about a genre I'm not familiar with, just to see how I could do. It was on a Hawaiian slack key guitarist. And I did okay. And actually the one of the first readers that wrote back to me on that story, like, thanks for writing about it. His sign off is now my sign off to kind of like help me remember where I came from. And basically says, thank you. I hope to see you again in Hawaiian. Um, and after that, kept pitching and kept pitching. And actually, the next story came when I found out there was a DJ that was let go from the local hip hop station and said, we need to do this. This is a big deal. Not only that they're letting him go, but that he's so beloved that people are protesting him being let go. And they took what I wrote to heart and actually hired him on as a columnist, as a hip hop columnist. And I have stayed in touch with him and I've considered him a mentor through the years. And then when the previous music critic left, I tried for the job and had already freelanced them for a while. So they were familiar with me. So the job interview wasn't even like about, if I could do this job. The job interview became like a story brainstorm and then it ended up doing it. And that's how it kind of, I guess, fell into it. I mean, even what I do now, project editing, wasn't something like, oh, I want to be a project editor. Because what does that even mean, right? I was on the audience operations side. So I was like an audience engagement editor first at the Post, and then wanted to still write, but not write all the time. So because I was in the audience engagement space, knew what resonated with readers. So then started like forming my own, like would ask my friends, like, how about we create the story? And I would start pitching stories with people across the room, like basically editors I wanted to learn from, and then got known for being able to like work across the room. And so I was one of the early project editors at the Post and actually created like how we even think about, the process of creating a project. So a lot of
Before
our
we
templates.
before we get more specifically into what you're doing now at the Post, I want to talk to you about being a woman of color in newsrooms across the country.
Yeah, that's
Seattle
not
Times,
easy.
the
Yeah.
Mercury News, the South Florida Sun Sentinel. What lessons did you learn? And I'm trying to be nice about it
I
because
know it's really hard because I think being I am a journalist because I want to like that is part of my purpose to very much represent the communities I come from, and that is female, immigrant, and Asian. And so that's very important to me. But I also think it's a careful balance of trying to represent and cover your community and not be pigeonholed. Um, because I covered a lot of the anti-Asian attacks that happened. I've interviewed victims. I was even part of the Atlanta shooting coverage, and they had asked me to help for Monterey Park. Um, and it's hard. I actually said no for Monterey Park because it was during Lunar New Year. I was saying family. Also, we are the Post. Like, get your act together. I am not a reporter. You should have other people who can speak. This is not okay to always lean on me. But it's also hard when you have to do I don't know what you call them, diversity reads. I don't know what they're usually called, where there's a story that's about the Asian community. And they're like, Marian, can you take a read to make sure it's not inflammatory or racist? It's like, that's great. I can't represent all, even Chinese again. How can I tell? I'm like, I can, but I also worry that if I am not there and I am not asked to read it, what would happen? So it's we're going through like figuring out how to make the post better. So I was like on a DEIB fix it group and flag that saying we need more people around the room. It can't just be me. It can't just like fall on one person. It has to be even like Pan Asian because different experiences need to be represented. And even for Atlanta, the way I got involved was because I had already been covering anti-Asian attacks before. Because I helped freelance for We Haven't Race and Identity newsletter. So it's the start. I was covering it even in 2019 as it was, it was starting, and realized that the team going to Atlanta was not Asian. There was not even the editors were Asian, and I'm like, this is something you need to go in carefully. Again, this is not a community. Asians are not a community that is very open, so you have to go in kind of softly. And then I was trying to explain this, and I'm like, forget it. Just add me on your team. Let me just help because now you're making me worry by the kind of questions you're asking me. So, yeah, it's always a balance, and it's always like being figuring out where your own comfort level is. Like, am I here to help educate? Like, when does it get to the point of being offensive to me? Like, I've had people ask me horrible things that they should know better. Like, is the term Oriental okay? Like, what? And then also down to what kind of imagery should we have for Lunar New Year? I'm like, oh my gosh, do I always have to be your Lunar New Year person? That kind of thing. To like, is Mandarin and Taiwanese the same thing? It has to be the same thing. I'm like, no, it is not the same thing. Please. And they'll follow it up with, oh, I know better. My college roommate was Taiwanese. And I was like thinking, no, you just made it even worse. Or sometimes you just want to be like, please just Google this because I don't say this to them, but my thinking is like, please Google this because it sounds like I'm your only person of color that you even know to ask. I hope I'm not your only friend of color. So it's
Marian, you have just beautifully brought us back to a point that was made in the last session, which is the gatekeepers matter.
they
So
do. They do.
whatever efforts that you're making in terms of audience engagement or diversity, or even just building your subscribers, who's designing those efforts matters.
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you an example where the Post are trying to figure out you know how there's a Time 100, like the movers and shakers.
Mhm.
We're going to figure out our own project. I think we're going to call it like the next 50. And the initial list that came from all the different departments was very not diverse. And the three of us that were diverse in the selection committee got together and we're like, we need to Well, I organize them to get together to be like, we need to make sure it's representative because readers are diverse, so it's not only a representative issue, it's also a money issue, who subscribes and everything. So it's really important to be representative. The other thing I've been working on for the Asian American Journalists Association is a style guide, like an AP style guide, but for the Asian community on what terms are okay to use and what terms are not okay to use, like kung flu or even like incarceration instead of internment. And instead of like every time you see an article that has like a racist term to send out a press release, this is a way so we can be proactive, like a guide for people to see like when they're writing the story, what is okay and what is not okay.
I'm going to open it up for questions, so please get those Zoom hands up. I can find my screen is finally fixed, so I can actually see when people raise their Zoom hands. But I want to ask you about what the atmosphere is like now with the backlash to diversity and inclusion, and when you are that voice in the wilderness and you're trying to raise these points, is it more difficult now? Do you feel a certain amount of pressure and stress that maybe you didn't feel a few years back?
I don't know if it's more, it's still difficult. I appreciate when we did the Fix It group, we added B, so DI. B, it means belonging, which I think is even more important than being represented. Because it means like, do we feel welcome in the newsroom? Do our readers feel welcome? I think it's important for it's true, the few of us in the newsroom to be outspoken, to band together, to make sure things get said, because and I guess to give folks the benefit of the doubt, it's not that they're necessarily trying to be not inclusive or even like racist. I think it's just not top of mind. Sadly, their friends aren't reflected of that. Their world is not reflective of that. And those of us who are, this is our reality. This is what we have to deal with. This is what I have to think of when I'm the only one in the room all the time, and that's not just necessarily because I'm Asian, but because I'm also female, because, that's English wasn't my first language, because my parents come from a different country, all those things. So, and also Asian and Latin are the fastest growing demos, and they don't necessarily always remember that and keep that in mind for the readership.
I'm going to put one of our fellows on the spot because she told me something in our opening training that I will literally never forget. And that would be Olivia, who told me that when she was hired, she's sitting in the business department of her paper, eager to start her first job, etc. And one of her colleagues came up and said, you don't belong here. You're in the wrong department. Yeah.
Oh,
Tell us
geez.
a little bit about how that experience affected you, Olivia.
Yeah, well, that colleague retired last month. So we don't have the craziness of him. But I mean, it was literally my first couple of days, so it was incredibly challenging to sort of navigate that because it's like I just got here, but I recognize that this is wrong. So do I
Very
immediately
wrong.
right? It's like, do I
Yeah.
immediately become the complainer and be like, this man said something that's not okay, and then
Was that
force
white
the company's hand to
man?
do something? Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Tell us more
Very
about his demeanor, his sort of interaction with you.
Yeah, so he was he walked over and was like, "Oh, like what's your name?" Said Olivia, and he was like, "Oh, the sports department's back there." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not a sports reporter. I'm a business reporter." Which in my mind was obvious because I was sitting at the business desk. So I was like, "Why is he confused by
Yeah.
this?" And he's like, "Oh, we've never had one that looks like you." And then he just
One.
walked away. And
Oh, jeez.
yes, and that was the moment that I realized that I am a rarity, and that's not necessarily bad. But then I just did
It's
some
not
more
bad.
Right. And it's like I did more research and realized between our tri-metro area, between Louisville, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis, I'm the only full-time Black female business reporter in an entire
Oh,
tri-metro area. So when I'm writing stuff, because our sister papers through the Gannett Network are also in Cincinnati and Indianapolis. So when I'm writing stuff, like I also have to be mindful that not only will the Black readers that read business stuff in my community see this, there's a high possibility my stuff will be on Wire and go to those communities. And like I am the only representation that these three major metros that get Gannett papers have. So it's
what
just,
paper are you at again?
I'm at the
Can I
Courier
ask?
Journal in Louisville.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're really important, in other words.
It feels that way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say. Haters gonna hate. And he is intimidated and insecure, and that's on him. Also, you represent, a readership that is important, that is growing, that has been neglected. Um, I haven't ever had anybody say you don't belong here, but I've had been told to my face that I would never make it. And I think that the way you show folks, naysayers like that up is with your success. And you should make sure to collect, folks that will likely write to you, collect them all and show them to these people. And just be like, I am making a difference in ways, of audiences that you need. Also, I think that, so I wrote a piece recently. Does chat work on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wrote a piece recently about my grandfather and that he turned 102. And
I shared that with you all. I
oh, you
shared that.
guys have it already.
Uh,
And what was cool was the audio producer suggested that, because in the original it didn't have like Chinese in it, and I had pitched doing like an audio version, and she was like, "Well, in your audio version, why don't you put Chinese in it?" Because like Spanglish, we first American born say Chinglish. So I don't call my grandpa, I say it in Chinese, And so that it's not a little bit more natural and inviting different kinds of readers. But it's also a shared problem that we all have grandparents that are getting older. We all are dealing with losing people, and it's a very shared experience. So I would encourage you to write things in that way that we're different and yet the same. We've gone through many things, and I think many even in our own community forget that in many ways we're all the same, and it's an important thing to hone in on.
well, as Olivia has demonstrated already, she's got major boss energy, so we're not worried about. But Amber, I believe, has a comment.
I want a t-shirt that says major boss. That is cool.
Oh, thanks so much for this talk.
Yeah.
Feel so empowered already. Yeah, I'm curious. I have a practical question about how when you mentioned the CNN person that you were speaking with on the low, how you go about starting up these conversations, or I don't know if in that case they were already your friend before you started these like offline.
Yeah, they were my friend.
Okay.
But also ONA Online News Association had a fellowship with CNN. So I had applied for that in order to get free registration to ONA because my paper at the time didn't cover it. And so then had met a lot of CNN folks and had reconnected with that friend and expressed interest in wanting to go there. So that's kind of like how it happened.
Yeah, well, I was curious if then maybe in other situations or if you've ever had it where like, yeah, you're how to start up basically those conversations if you are curious about working at another place while you're in a newsroom, like when it sometimes feels like journalism is still pretty small or like in
It
certain
is really
states,
small.
right?
It's very, very small. I would suggest getting involved with the different journalism organizations. I'm pretty heavily involved with AJA and ONA, and with I was involved with Society of Feature Journalists, SFJ, and all of them have led to jobs, literally. AJ especially, just because you don't know where people might go, where they might be going, and it's not necessarily like being at the job fair, but just talking with people, just being open as they're talking about their jobs, even like how asking people and I even do this at work, when I talk to different editors, the same things that Rachel's asking me right now, like, how did you get into doing what you're doing? Like, I'll ask editors this, like, how did you get there? Like you're doing a really cool job. Like for project editing, I asked my friend who was the very first project editor I worked, I'm like, how did you get into this? How can I get into this? I think what you're doing is really cool. I'm like, and so then she kind of knows, and when things happen, she'll be like, hey, Marian's interested in this. So it's kind of being very open.
So it sounds like there's, in terms of tips on like how to do that, but still on the low, so it doesn't get back to folks in your newsroom. It sounds like there's also like coded ways, like, and that you are genuinely interested in people's
Yeah. I mean,
no,
even like so I think it's, and I also freelance a lot. I also do contracting a lot. All this you have to make sure it's okay with your current job, but those can also lead to different things. And then like volunteering so much with AHA, that has led to different things. So it's not as much coded, just being like, I'm interested in this, I want to help out, yeah, if that makes sense.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Who else? Are there any other questions? I want you to tell us a little bit more about developing projects and ideas at the Washington Post. I mean, 40 years ago when I was starting out, that was the ultimate dream for a journalist, to wind up at either Washington Post or the New York Times. And so you're being there, obviously the fact that you brought different perspective, different lived experience, certainly had got you noticed and whatever. But now you're in charge of really trying to help the paper sort some challenges out, some really key challenges. So tell us.
Yeah, thank you. I think this kind of goes back to the other questions too. I'm not like I joke around like that I'm outspoken as an Asian person, but I'm not necessarily outspoken as a journalist. Like I'm not that like super aggressive in your face type person, because that's culturally feels yucky to me. I'm like, I can't do it. That's hard. That's very aggressive, but I'm very, very persistent. So I will never take no as a no. So if you tell me no, I will like figure I even after interviews, I'll ask like, why was that no? What could I have said? Like, just tell me constructively, like, and I'm nice about it just because I want to learn. And so when I hear it no, I'm like, is that no, not now? No, how? How can I be better to fit that? So I'm always kind of thinking about that. And so I'm very, very persistent. And so I think that for getting back to your now I got into a tangent. What was your original question?
No, so for example, I was fascinated to hear about your work on the January 6th. And something like that clearly illustrates the need for diversity. And
Yeah.
so I recall sitting on my couch on January 6th and watching that and feeling an enormous well of trauma come up. And sort of about childhood memories of whatever. So you're in a really important job in that you bring a set of experiences that
are different.
Eyes on the masthead.
Yeah.
So cool about.
Okay, this is why I mentioned the no thing. Now I remember is I have tried to apply for the Washington Post many different times in my career. I'm like 20 some years in. I probably look a lot younger than I am, but I tried what?
I was just gonna say I used to be able to say that, and
you can still.
Now I was 20 years older. No,
I mean, it's like Asian, no reason. That's what I say. But I tried for the internship at the Post every single year. College did not get it. I tried different points in my career to get it, didn't get it. And I think when I tried, it was when we were launching the travel section, and I had, worked producing different sites for CNN and their social, and one of them was travel. And so within a very distinct niche, I think that was very hard to find people in that audience space. So ended up being part of that launch team that launched the travel section for the Post, the new travel section. And our goal was to kind of reach millennial women. I think it's important. When I think of diversity, I don't think of just like race, but I also think like generation. I also think like, what platform do you read it on? Are you audio? Are you video? Are you more, photos? I think of it as all terms of diversity. I also think of age, background, country of origin, all of it. So I think it's very important. And I think also for January 6th, we came out with our big project so in October, so many months afterwards. And coming from audience engagement, I wanted to see, where were people finding our stories? So I took our top 50 past January 6th stories and looked at where the traffic was coming from. And not surprisingly, even a week after the insurrection, it was not coming from search. Because when you think about it, as a reader, why would you be searching for this? I mean, it was a year of killer bees, like too much crap was going on to even like think about it. So then realized, okay, we have to be incredibly strong on social because we need to serve it up where people are. And so like we did it on TikTok, we did it on newsletters, we did it on homepage, we did it on alerts, we did it, marketing emails, like all of the above. And the way we did TikTok was also smart too. We did 3 different kinds of TikTok for 3 different kinds of people. First one was very obvious. It just basically copy and paste the story, like photos, description, very like Instagram kind of carousel kind of feel. The other one was we got a hold of voicemails, basically threatening different government officials that they were going to, do the insurrection. So you just saw the image was just a phone, desktop phone with, and you can actually hear the audio of the threat, the voicemail threat. And then the third way, because TikTok's a fun medium and you want to play to the medium. And so we had our main guy, Dave, be the older person, and then the intern come up to him and ask, do you even remember what happened on January 6th? Which is what we were all, coming to terms with. And then he was just like, no, like that. And then we just had a link, like, this is a breakdown of what happened that day and all the repercussions. So it's being able to think about how to distribute and get it to people's hands, because you can't, I joke around saying that we're not Field of Dreams. Just because we build it, they're not going to come. That's not how people work. That's not how anything works. People are, especially like for communities of color, if they haven't reached us before, why would we read it now? You have to go where we are. You have to reflect us. You have to write about us in a real way, not write at us or to us, but like from the inside. So it's thinking about all of that. And also like in a newsroom where there are so many people who might say stuff like, you don't belong here, you're never going to make it, like, or even having it in their heads, you have to be very, and when I don't like using the word aggressive, but you have to be very persistent and assertive, like, I am going to be heard, that this is important, that things are important, and that, and to constantly say it. So I've launched 2 other sections, besides travel at the Post, one on well-being, and basically help frame it with the editor, like, we are the anti-goop, we are covering bodies of all shapes, sizes, and colors, and that's important. And then when we did style, this is not just out, like, kept pushing. We need to cover younger people of color. That has to be the readership. So to have them to think that way, and not just in terms of words and people you interview, but the photos too.
Well, to play devil's advocate, you raise an incredibly powerful point there when you said, if you haven't been covering us or reflecting us historically, why should we start reading you now?
Exactly.
I wonder if that's a huge challenge.
It is a huge challenge. And it's also a huge challenge in how to measure the impact. Because if you just look at black and white terms, if you just look at page views, conversions, engagement time, you can't compare like a story about the Trump trials or the insurrection against like a politics story against like something about like the Asian community, because you have the politics audience, but you might not have the Asian audience. So of course the Asian story is going to look a lot softer against the other story. So other places like URL media, which is umbrella group for brown and black media, and also like the 19th, have created different ways of tracking impact, which include like, what are people commenting? Is this story helping bring legislation? Is it helping bring speaking engagements? So I've been working with the Reynolds Journalism Institute out of Mizzou. So I worked with URL Media actually to figure out how do we templatize this tracking system and put something very qualitative into something quantitative, like put it into Google Analytics, and also like to tell that story.
Since you mentioned that project, tell us a little bit about your work with the paper in Kansas City.
This is a really cool one. We're finishing this one up. So Kansas City Defender is a social first advocacy paper. So what they do is so they basically tell news in the Black community in Kansas. So basically everything that you wish would be in like mainstream that is not there. For example, like the sad story of, when you hear a teen that knocks on a door, and gets shot, maybe mainstream, in this case, mainstream did not include the racists, which is the whole point of what happened. And he, interviewed like both sides about what happened. And social first meaning that what many mainstream media do is they'll write the story for the site and they'll tease it on Instagram, which is frustrating for readers, right? They'll just like tease it and then won't tell you exactly what happened. They'll make you click over, but that's not necessarily the behavior of people on Instagram. Like that's so annoying to click over. So what he'll do is like put the basics of the story on Instagram, not care as much to put it on the site. The site is an afterthought. So helping him templatize that approach so other people can make, similar kinds of media.
Listen, we're nearing the end of our hour, folks. So last call for any questions. If you raise your hands, if you do want to ask a question, but I'll jump in quickly and ask. It seems to me that so much of the challenge of developing new products or new verticals or new whatever is based on actual clicks, or what evidence do we have that people are buy our subscriptions or click on our website. So is that a challenge when it comes to, saying this is what we ought to do?
It is a challenge. That's why other media like URL and the 19th are figuring out other ways of measuring impact. So it's not just on clicks, because it doesn't tell the full story, especially when you don't have a foothold in that audience yet. But yeah, it becomes really hard. I think increasingly an industry is moving away from being advertiser based, it's being more subscriber based. So to figure out how to get at that, just get at those people.
Brandon writes that Capital B is rethinking their impact. Tell us a little bit more about that, Brandon.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I just put a carrot in my mouth. No, but we had a national summit. So I'm Brandon. I'm the national politics reporter at Capital B, and we had our national company summit in January, and we had an entire session about like what does impact mean and sort of like look like at a place like Capital B, right? That we're super small, we're a nonprofit. For us, impact isn't the same as like a ProPublica story, right? Where it's just like we're gonna green light this story if we can't prove that Clarence Thomas took millions of dollars in whatever and it's going to change Supreme Court policy. But for us, it's sort of like impact being, are you getting feedback from people in a particular community that you've covered who are saying that like you are offering a dimension of coverage that we haven't gotten before? Are you getting are you sparking conversations? Are you sparking debate about something that hasn't happened before? Are you we have like an entire doc. Actually, maybe I can pull it up really quickly.
And I shared the one from URL too. I don't know if you know Simone, who went to Capitol B. I think, did she
yeah,
just leave there?
she
She
did. She
was
left.
there.
But I know Simone. She's great.
She is amazing.
She hired me.
She's the one, she was like the first editor I worked with. She was one of the co-founders of that race and Night In newsletter. I was really
Mhm.
sad when she left us. She was
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. So like this is just like an over. It's like, did something get an award? Was it shared by someone who's influential in a particular field? Did it spark a reader to take a specific action to vote, participate in civic events? Did it spark a community connection? Did it help dispel myths? Did your story help to get someone to donate funds, even if it's only like did someone express gratitude? Did it increase awareness around something? Was it picked up by a different media outlet? Was there sort of like an official citation or a policy change? Has it been widely read? Has a reader told you that they use your reporting to navigate an issue they're facing? But anyway, those are just like some of the examples.
Yeah, it seems very similar to your take a look at ours too, because they took that and then we're able to put that into Google Analytics to create like a report. So it took it even a further step to how to measure all that.
I'm gonna look at that. No, but
yeah.
this is great.
Marian, I want to ask you about this word leadership. I know, and I've told some of my NPF colleagues and other people throughout the years that I never really visualized myself being the director of anything or the managing editor or the top dog in any situation, because I always felt like it would take me away from the core reasons that I became a journalist, which was to connect with community, to work with smart colleagues and produce things together. So it was always different for me, but I'm wondering, we do have a fellow, Kayla, are you still there? Well, so in terms of leadership and in terms of seeing yourself as in that kind of a role, what has your journey been like in that regard? Do you feel yourself now as the project director, or you still are really living cool?
I think that you can lead from where you are. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean like, because what I do as a project editor is I kind of embed into different teams. So I inherit teams along the way. So I don't have necessarily have people report into me. So it won't be like technically a leader. But I think that I would think of myself as like a thought leader, I guess, and help in that way. I do have my MBA, which prepared me in that way. I have an executive MBA. And it wasn't journalism specific, but what was nice about that, it kind of gave me the tools, like literal technical tools like accounting, economics, that kind of stuff, but also how to talk in that language. Because a lot of times when we're meeting with marketing and stuff, they'll say these acronyms and do these terms, and I'll know what they mean, and it's not a big deal. Yeah, I think it's very important to lead where you are, and just because of it doesn't matter necessarily what your title, but that it's important to express a different viewpoint, different things. I'm in our mentorship program at work, and I've been menteeing this copy aide who wants to become a journalist and kind of has been stuck as a copy aide. And I was trying to tell him, like, stop, don't pitch things that are general, like Caitlin Clark, and they're going to ask somebody from sports to write that. But what is it about you specifically that you bring different to the table? What can you write about from your own understanding, from your own community, that nobody else can do? And what is that story? And that is what's going to set you apart. So that's what I've always thought, like, what kind of story can I write that's specific to me, that is not being written about, that represents a whole of coverage? So that's always kind of where I come from.
Well, my last question is about the devilish imposter syndrome.
I'm bad at that too.
Again, as women.
As women, it's always like that, yeah.
So as you get ready to say goodbye to us, what advice would you give us about staying grounded in who we are and what we want to accomplish and our vision. Can that help combat these feelings of, what if they find out I'm not supposed to be here, or maybe I'm not as good as I think I am?
Yeah. Wait, let me click on all these links that you put in there before I lose this chat. On terms of imposter syndrome, I was just in a last year I was in a women's leadership program for Online News Association, which is one of the more like harder to get in programs. First off, it was like the fourth time I applied, and asking around, everybody in the room had applied multiple times. And that was what the folks, the coordinators had said, many people have applied many times. So just because you don't get in doesn't necessarily mean anything. Also, it was a group of 20 of us women from regional papers to big papers like New York Times, Arizona Republic, also ones in London and in Canada, like the big leaders in the room. And the biggest thing that we all talked about was imposter syndrome. So all these powerful, seemingly powerful women were all questioning whether or not they should be in the room, and all different backgrounds, so not just minorities. We're all questioning that. So that was really grounding to hear that from everybody, that we all felt that way. Also, I think it's natural to feel that way. I think I still feel that way. Like, do I belong here? Should I have a say? But I mean, to Olivia, you were picked there to be for a reason. It's not like you just showed up to the newsroom and sat there. Like, you were hired to be there. There's a reason why you're in that room, why you're in that meeting, why somebody else tapped you. It's not like you just decided to join, So that by itself is empowering to know that. And also the fact that you represent, I think many of us in this room represent, folks that are not heard usually and need to be heard. And like I said, not only to reflect readers, but for as customers, it's important for the bottom line. And we represent that all the time, and we carry that. And it's both, it can be both, I guess, a burden and a responsibility that is important. So I think it's important to feel out that, I think it's something that so many of us share, the imposter syndrome, and something I still deal with. But I think it's very valid, but you're there for a reason.
Marian Chia-Ming Liu, I greatly appreciate
Yeah.
the opportunity now to say that I know you and that you are a part of the National Press Foundation Widening the Pipeline family. So thank you so much for taking time out to join us today.
I'm putting my email in the chat. Feel free to introduce, please. I hate it when I do these talks and then nobody emails me, and I feel like it's the saddest thing. So please reach out. Let me know if you need anything, if you need a chat, if you need to talk out something. I've been there. I've been told, all the negative things that you're probably getting on the positive things too. So I've been on that path, and I'm happy to help you all figure it out too.
Great. Well, thank you so much.